In today's video, we look at how Hikaru Nakamura used the Hippo Defense to beat his FIDE Master opponent in a blitz game while only using 42 seconds on his clock. Let's take a look. So this game starts off with the move of e4, Hikaru playing with the black pieces, plays g6 and bishop g7. This is how I start off my Hippo games. But here after d4, I play the move of d6. Hikaru, on the other hand, usually plays the move of b6 and bishop b7, getting a double fianchetto. And okay, we have castling kingside, e6, d6, right? We tuck that knight. Queen e2 is played. We play h6 and a4. Now here in this position, it's very important to realize that we got to play this move of a6. Okay, a6 is a very important idea against a move like a4, because let's just say you don't. Let's just say you play a move here like castling kingside. Now you face a5. White can take this pawn whenever they want. They can push whenever they want. So they're the ones with the leverage. And if we take this pawn, we're technically still okay. But in all honesty, I mean, okay, the rook takes back. We have an isolated pawn already. The game's already kind of starting to break open in a way that I don't think really practically helps black at all. And if we play a move like c5, that rook is attacked, and so is the pawn on d4. But now we have a move like rook a4, simply helping out the defense of that pawn. And I'm not the biggest fan of this position. I think the Hippo Defense is a really good system, in which case you get that thick-skinned Hippo, 10 moves in, 8 to 10 moves in. And then from that point, you slowly improve, right? But this game is kind of broken up pretty fast, and I'm not sure black is prepared for it. We could play a move like knight d7, and we're technically okay, but I'm very concerned about this d6 pawn, among other things. Okay, so we have this move of a4. We have the move of a6, whole idea being if a5, which is, by the way, was played in the game. We have b5, and now a5 is really nothing but just a big old target. Okay, this is not a good idea on white's part. And of course, this is a blitz game, but at the same time, I mean, we got a FIDE Master playing a4 and a5, which I don't really think helps white hardly at all. Now, if we ever do move this c pawn, a5 is going to be a target, and this pawn ain't going nowhere for quite a while, right? The only defender of that pawn is this rook, and if you play a move like b4 at some point, defending it, you got other issues, including the fact that our dark squared bishop is going to have some potential. So we play that move of b5. White here continues with the move d5. Hikaru immediately responds in just a couple of seconds with this move of e5. Now, usually I would totally co-sign this, right? Especially with a move like d5. Oftentimes we play e5, and then from that point we look to prepare an f5 push, bring this knight over, right? We start to get kind of into a King's Indian defense type game, in which case we can drop our bishop back to c8 and activate it, all that kind of good stuff. Here's the issue though. In this position, by playing the move of e5, we've already fianchetted our bishop, and white has already kind of dislodged our pawn to b5, right? So here white missed this, by the way, but they could have played bishop takes b5 with check, and when we take that bishop back, queen captures. Now here in this position, in this exact position, we're up 1 point in material, but this bishop is going to get just taken the next move, right? If we run away, if we block, no matter what we do, this bishop's going to be lost. So we might as well play bishop c6 so that when white does take it, we at least get one more pawn back. But I mean, in this case, guys, we're just down a pawn. Okay, with really nothing to show for it except white having a great passer on a5. Okay, so after the move of e5, this is a blunder by Hikaru based on the fact that white had bishop takes b5 with check. But instead we see this move of h4 and now knight d7, right? Just continuing, to develop. And okay, h5 is played here pretty quickly in the game. Hikaru plays knight f6. I'm going to say that I think g5 is a better option. I mean, in a lot of ways now, I mean, what's white going to do, right? I mean, white can't play f4 at any point because we have a double pawn grip on that square. Okay, this h5 pawn ain't going nowhere. The g pawn, if you push it, you're just making more weaknesses. If the b pawn pushes, I mean, yeah, where's that pawn going to go? The a pawn can't push. What I'm trying to say is if you look at white's pawn structure, half of their pawns literally cannot move. Okay, and you could say the same thing for black, but I think we have more leverage because of the fact that we have moves like g4 or b4 available whenever we want. But more than that, I mean, these pawns are just big old weaknesses, right? These pawns on the sideline can't move, and neither can ours, but ours are a lot better defended, right? By, a bishop and a rook on both sides. And white's pawns are more far extended. You may want to argue that this gives white space. I'm going to argue that it gives them nothing but more stuff to defend. Okay, sometimes you push so far that you're the one that ironically becomes the one in danger, right? We've seen this in a lot of different openings. The Black Knight's Tank with the Hippopotamus Defense. These are openings for black, in which case we want white to push so far, right? To keep pushing so far that their king ends up being the one with no defense. Kind of an interesting idea, but okay, going back to h5, we instead have this move from Hikaru of knight f6. White ends up taking. We capture back with the f pawn, just, keeping these guys intact. Knight h4. White here, looking to put some pressure on the light squares, but g5 is played, simply trying to kick this knight around. And right when this knight goes back, we simply have castle and kingside and knight g6. I love this move from Hikaru, aiming for this f4 square. And you see this pawn structure a lot with the Hippo system. Eventually getting this kind of pattern, or on the queen side, right? Getting this kind of pattern. Obviously, white kind of set the tone here in the center. So, okay, we're going to match that, and we're going to put as much attention as we can on that f4 square, and look to potentially throw a knight into that spot. Okay, so black here with a very strong idea of knight f4 coming soon, at least. But white just puts an end to this. Right, we have g3. Okay, g3 is played. And now c6. Now, the computer isn't the biggest fan of this move. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a blunder or anything like that. What I will say is that in this kind of pawn structure, you hardly ever want to use the c-pawn, because the second you do, white can take, and now you're stuck with a backwards pawn. And on top of that, d5 is a very strong square for white to take advantage of. Of course, in this case, I would say things are a little bit different than usual, simply due to the fact that this bishop is on d3, and honestly, white's underdeveloped. I mean, this bishop has not moved, the rook has not moved, and honestly, it really can't unless they just want to give up the pawn. And white's a little bit cramped here. I mean, this bishop is not doing well. Let's just put it plainly, right? I mean, where can it even move? If you go there, you lose a bishop. If you go there, you lose a bishop. Those are your only options. And even this dark squared bishop, I mean, it is on a, it is opposite of certain pawns, but at the same time, it's really not that great at the moment. I guess you could play a move like bishop e3 and look to come to b6. That's, one of the better ideas that I could see here. But overall, white has a lot of issues that I got to kink out here. But again, just to kind of share that idea. Okay, so we're going to go back to an early stage, right? We're going to go back here. So let's just say, right, like in the game, white plays d5. Okay, now in this kind of pawn structure, this is very similar to a King's Indian defense type pawn structure. Which one of these pawns do we want to push like crazy, and which one of these pawns do we never want to touch? Ever, right? In almost any case. We never want to touch this guy, right? Because if we touch this guy, let's say white moves, if we touch this guy, white can take, right? We have a backwards pawn, very awkward, and a d5 hole that is very weak. There are no pawns in this game that can ever defend that square again. This is not good for us, right? But going back, right, let's say we push this f pawn. This is great. This is fantastic, because if white takes, we just take back, and I mean, we got a huge presence in the center here. We're wiping out half of the fourth rank. And going back, if they don't take, okay, great for us. We can look at a move like f4 at some point, maybe drop this bishop back. We could just tuck this knight into f6, keep adding some pressure here. The second they take, we take back. We're owning the fourth rank, and this d5 pawn is becoming weaker and weaker, especially as we have the possibility of throwing a third attacker into the mix. So that's just a start, right? So that's d5, right? But let's say we see the move e5. Okay, now first off, in this position, we don't actually necessarily have to push this pawn, okay? But let's just say we do, right? Going forward, which one of these pawns, this is more of a French defense structure in the center, which one of these pawns are we good to push like crazy, and which one of them do we never want to push? Well, again, we don't want to push the f pawn in this case, because the advanced pawn, if it goes to f6 or f5, can simply capture back. Now we have a backwards pawn, which, by the way, white can just take immediately, and e5 is extremely weak, right? So the advanced pawn, you don't want the advanced pawn to be able to take something and leave that square open for the opponent's pieces, let alone that open file, right? So, okay, we got that move of e5. Again, let's just say we close it down. We don't want to push this f pawn. Okay, that is not a good idea. But on the other hand, c5 is actually the computer move here. Yes, just giving up a pawn and playing knight c6. I mean, really going for that a5 pawn. There's really not a great way for white to directly defend it, right? I mean, b4 is just not going to get the job done, because we just take that pawn, and now you have double isolated pawns and this isolated pawn on a5. And yeah, I mean, if something like bishop d2, okay, in that case, you know, there's plenty of ways that we can improve our position here. But at the end of the day, white has a lot of pawn weaknesses, and this is the line that the computer chose for black. That said, going back to e5 here, this is all hypothetical. I would say against e5, d5 is not necessary, because by playing that, they kind of just helped us activate our bishop, right? They kind of just helped us do that. So there's a lot of options that we have here, including just, you know, castling kingside. We could even take this knight. The computer likes taking and then throwing the knight to c6. I mean, really putting a lot of pressure on white's pawn here, on e5 and d4 as well. But all that to say, just be mindful, when the center is locked up, there's going to be one of those pawns that you should not push, and one of those pawns that you should push like crazy. And it's all dependent on which one of white's pawns is advanced. We don't want to let that advanced pawn ever take anything at all, because it's going to leave an open space and it's going to leave an open file, right? So, okay, going back to the Hikaru game, that is why, generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of this move of c6. Okay, it's not, you know, a huge mistake. It's definitely not as big of a mistake as it usually would be, you know, in the hippo. But I think here I would probably just, you know, start looking at an improving move like bishop c8 as an example. Okay, but all right, we have this move of c6. White takes, we have a backwards pawn, d5 is weak, but again, white's pieces are not very coordinated. We have this move of knight f1, Hikaru goes back to e7, eyeing that d5 square. We have queen e8, and now white just immediately tries to take control of that square, right? Very logical. However, in this case, Hikaru is able to take, and take, and take. So that move was simply not the right timing, right? White had the right idea, right? White is looking at this very weak square, but at the end of the day, we have 3 attackers. You only have 2 defenders. We're winning a pawn, okay? So we take, we finish out with the bishop. I mean, talk about an active minor piece. Wow. Very active. Yeah, hard to get more active of a bishop in the middle game, honestly. We have bishop e4, white trying to desperately trade this guy off. Hikaru goes, okay, let's trade it off. Queen f7. Forming a little battery ram against that f2 pawn. Mind you, Hikaru hasn't played perfectly here, but he's only used 35 seconds on the clock. So let's just, I mean, that's a little crazy, right? Just think about that. But okay, bishop e3, d5, right? Kicking this queen around. I mean, absolute dominance on the 4th rank here. Our pawns are, I mean, yeah, I mean, they're attacking 6 of the 8 squares, right, on the 4th rank. The only squares we're not attacking with pawns are g4 and b4. But, I mean, we're steamrolling white here. We play d4. That bishop gets dropped back. Rook a c8. Very, you know, straightforward move, just going for that c2 pawn. Why not put your rook on the semi-open file, attacking one of your opponent's pawns? c3 is played, and now b4. Fascinating how Hikaru can find a move like this so quickly. Really is a great move. I mean, just adding more and more pressure onto the c3 pawn. And in the game, white takes on d4, but what's the idea here? Why can't white just take the supposedly free pawn? Well, because it's not free, right? It comes with a price, and that's that black gets the rook on the 2nd rank. If you defend the bishop, we take a pawn, and at this point, if you ever move your bishop, rook takes f2. I mean, this is just crushing for black. If your queen runs away to h1, queen b3, right? If your queen defends that pawn, queen f3, you know, 2 passed pawns, a triple battery ram on the f file. This queen really cannot move unless white just wants to give up a mating net or a free queen right out the gate. And yeah, this is just not good for white, right? So we have b4. White instead takes on d4, but same idea, right? We play rook c2. If something like bishop e3, we can just take. White plays rook a d1. We have e takes d4, rook f1, and b3. Here, white resigns the game. As you can see, white has used a good chunk of their time, right? Which is usually what you do when you're playing chess. You use your time, right? But okay, Hikaru hasn't. He's only used 42 seconds, and white resigns the game here. Some of you may be wondering why the FIDE master resigned. Probably because they knew they were just dead lost against Hikaru. And if you're dead lost against Hikaru, it's not looking good. Right, it's not looking good. Hikaru isn't one of those players that can give you the game back on one move. He's just going to keep playing at an elite rate, and this is just not good, right? I mean, we have a double battery ram here, a very active rook on c2, okay? And I mean, what does white even do here, right? I mean, the rook can't move unless you want to lose your bishop. This pawn is attacked. If you want to defend the pawn in this kind of manner, okay, we can just kind of improve our pieces. Okay, if you move the bishop, we take that pawn. If you move the rook, we take this guy. If you move this guy, we take the queen. You know, let's say you move the rook or something. Okay, d3. If you move back, just going back and forth, boom. Now we got 1, 2, 3, 4 attackers on that f2 pawn. Yeah, this is just not looking good for white. Okay, so that is why white resigned the game after the move of b3. But just a couple of takeaways, right? If you're playing the hippo, right, going back, remember, against something like a4, if there's not a pawn on c4, which I have talked about on the channel, you got to play a6 so that if they play a5, you got b5 ready to go. Now this pawn is just a big old target. In this kind of situation, be careful, right? Be careful if white has a battery ram against, let's just say, the b pawn, okay? Because they can actually take and end up snatching off your bishop. So you want to be careful in that kind of scenario. It's pretty rare that that happens, in all honesty. But okay, I mean, you know, again, if something like h5, I would play g5 here. You know, these pawns are way too far extended and they're just becoming big weaknesses. Now it's up to black. Black is really the one with the leverage here. Black is the one with pawns that can make an impact on the opponent's position, which white has kind of already done that, and it kind of led to nowhere for them except just big old weaknesses. So yeah, those are a couple of big takeaways. I would also include, you know, later on in this game, right? You know, I mean, I think this is a great setup for black. You know, if white locks it up in this kind of scenario, remember, you don't got to push this pawn, okay, which Hikaru did, but you don't got to do that. You can really focus in on that f4 square. And okay, if something like g3 here, there's a lot of things that could happen. You know, knight e7 is solid, queen d7 is good. You know, there's a lot of solid moves here. I would just say that c6 isn't the best, okay? But yeah, I mean, if I had to pick one side here, I'm choosing black every time, and I can't tell you how often I get positions like this in my own hippo games. Keep playing the hippo, keep playing chess. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so that you don't miss out on anything coming our way. And on top of that, I wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of November in 2023. Big love to y'all. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon member, you can click on a link down in the description below, and in that, you will see all the benefits, including one in which we recently added, which is actually a once-a-month session with me, in which case we go over patrons' games. I'll see you all in the next one.